I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your feeder flash for Tuesday, July the 24th, where the Northern Video was crazy on Monday, starting out with their big summertime classic, and it'll continue, but the yearlings that they sold on Monday should springboard their calf sales for Tuesday and Wednesday, and really get a good pricing on some of these fall delivery calves up in the mountain states and the northern plains, especially in that Montana, Wyoming region. That sale's based out of Billings, Montana, and they pretty well clean the slate up in that part of the country. But let's look at the board on Monday. August live cattle futures down 20 cents, 108.72, and that cattle on feed report, just like it should have, did not shake up anything on the board. Everything just kind of hung in there pretty tight. October was up 35 cents at 110.60. August feeder cattle down 42 cents at 153 1/4, and October up 37 cents at 155.15. You'll notice all these feeder cattle contracts on the board are quite a bit higher than what the average of your 800-pound feeder steers are bringing into sales right now, but not on these out front sales, on those video sales and things like that. We've got some catching up to do. We don't have the best offerings in our on-site feeder cattle auctions right now. Kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel on a lot of these sale barn sales, but most of your better big long strings are selling on the videos as those cattle are turned out. Most of them are already turned out in load lot numbers, and so it's hard to get those cattle to come back to a sale barn. But let's look at the weighted average on last week's fat cattle trade that ended up being huge, 128,300 head. And that goes to show you there was hardly any of that reported in USDA Market News or anywhere else that we actually got some sales of fat cattle on Friday. We did see a little trickle of them start coming in. We knew that the dress trade was 180. We knew that there was some 114 out there, but we hadn't seen the gate swing at 113 like they did. And even though we've got mandatory price reporting, I don't know that these packers are getting in a big hurry to turn those numbers in. And of course nobody else is peeking a word of it, and so we have to wait until mid-morning on Monday to find out that they sold nearly 130,000 head of fat cattle direct basis out of the feedlots, and that's kind of ridiculous. But regardless, there was a big movement of direct negotiated fed cattle sales out of the feedlots. Like I said, 128,300. That compares to just 50,400 head the week before, and 116,400 the same week a year ago. But let's look at the trend on those. In the southern plains, we saw some 114. I thought that 114 might stick, but to really sell the volumes, it took 113. So it was mostly 113, which would have been $2 higher. In the northern plains, it was 113 also, which was $2 to $3.50 higher. And your dress trade mostly at 180, but ranging from 178 to 181, that'd be $5 to $6 higher. But your weighted averages in the 5-area feeding region, your live steers averaged 112.61. That'd be $2.11 higher than the previous week's weighted average. And on dress trade, come out to be exactly 179 smooth, and that was up $4.95 compared to the previous week's weighted average. Nationwide, you look out, they sold a lot of cattle on the fringes too, because nationwide ended up with 147,900 head in negotiated sales, and that's very impressive. Only 18,700 of those sold for the 15 to 30 day delivery, so it doesn't look like the packers are trying to set things up for a fall yet. They're just trying to cover immediate needs, and they've sold a lot of meat out front, and they've got to get those needs covered too. But that 15 to 30 day sales was less than 13% of your total nationwide volume, so most everything for immediate delivery on there. Now let's look at some of your feeder cattle auctions. And the big one I want to talk about was on Monday, and opened that up with your Northern Livestock video, just selling those yearlings. We talked about how wild the Superior and the Western sales were there a couple of weeks ago. This one is wilder yet. And I say wild, it's just now kind of getting up there where your feeder cattle board says things ought to be, although it's doing it on 9-weight steers instead of 800-pound steers. That's one reason that our index levels are lagging so far behind, is because we don't get any of these big outstanding sales on the videos, because it's hard for those to be current delivery. When you got a 3-day video and you're selling thousands of them in a string, it's hard to get those things all delivered up by the time your current delivery runs out, which is the next 14 days. A lot of them are for 2 to 3 weeks out. And a lot of times they're selling a lot higher than what your spot market is on cattle that are weighing a whole lot heavier. We're just not seeing those featured strings this time of year in your auction sales, your brick and mortar sales on site. But your CME index, the latest that came out was actually for the end of the week last week at 148.35, and that's running about $5 below what your spot feeder cattle board is. But on there, and we talk about a lot of those program cattle, and I don't know if we should consider NHTC or non-hormone treated cattle to be a fancy program, but those guys are giving up the weight gain they would see with an implant, and saving that for the buyer, whether he wants to give them an implant himself and get all the good out of it in the feedlot, or if he wants to keep those cattle hormone free and try to find a premium whenever he sells those cattle fat. But regardless, those NHTC cattle are very popular, especially in the northern regions. And for the September delivery cattle, weighing 9 to 950 pounds, had over 3,000 of them, and they traded from 161 all the way up to 169.5, but mostly around that 161, 162, and the weighted average on those was 161.69. Biggest part of those cattle were from the Sunlight ranches, which you see here. Part of those from Lodge Grass, Montana, and some of them from Sheridan, Wyoming. Those cattle weighed from 9 to 950, most of them 910 to 9 1/4 there. Had kind of a crazy slide on them with a 6-cent slide going up, 3-cent slide going down, and then a 30-pound weight stop and a slide stop, which it takes quite a bit of ciphering to get all that down to come up with a pay weight. But regardless, they know what those cattle are going to weigh, and that's mainly why they put so much of that on that slide. They've check weighed those cattle, and they know what they'll do. They're the same cattle that they put out every time. A large percentage of them are home raised cattle. Some of them are purchased cattle, but they're purchased in large lots, a lot of times off the video or direct off local ranches up in that part of the country. But they had a big slug of those cattle for September delivery, weighing in the light 9s there, and the biggest part of those bring from 161, 162.5. But like I said, I had some of those with all the bells and whistles up to 169.50, but the weighted average on those light 9s for September delivery, 161.69. Now let's look at some on-site sales early in the week on Monday. Oklahoma City had 4,500 head there. Feeder steers there steady to $2 higher. Feeder heifers $1 to $4 higher. Not a good enough test on calves to really tell what the market was doing. And you see we're getting into the full brunt of the dog days this summer. Just 4,500 head in Oklahoma City, and that would be considered a light summertime run. Joplin Regional Stockyards had a few more than that, 5,200 head. Of course, they get more calves over in that region, and did have a good test of calves there, $3 to $6 higher. Yearlings were $2 to $4 higher in Joplin. Let's look at a couple of individual quotes out of Joplin Regional Stockyards. 118 head of 650-pound steers bring $1.65. And a big load of 787-pound steers in Joplin bring $155.50. That's your feeder flash for Tuesday.